Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined on Blogging Heads TV. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today, welcome back, Phoebe Maltz Bovy. So Phoebe, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am now one of the senior editors at The Signal, which is a new digital general interest current affairs publication. And I'm very excited about this. And you may know me from previous hits such as Feminine Chaos, which lives on Patreon after it's very it was sad to leave Blogging Heads, but we do live on as an audio only. And I'm the author of the ancient tome from 2017, The Perils of Privilege, which I'm sure somebody on their stoop where you're walking by might be throwing out, and then you can take a look.
I still have my copy.
Take a gander. Oh, that's sweet.
And
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've been tweeting this kind of joking, but like you were ahead of your time, and if the book had come out a couple of years later,
I know it's upsetting. It is a not good thing to be ahead of your time.
It's like the way you saw it's like a surfing metaphor. You saw the wave coming, and then like you just like dove in a little too early, and maybe like a year or two later, it would have been different. But yeah, I enjoyed the book. We did a conversation, I guess, about 4 years ago.
We did, and you know what? I'm sorry, but this is very in keeping with our theme. But like, I keep seeing tweet threads where somebody's like, "Have you ever thought about the word privilege and how people use it?" It's like, like go away, like, make it stop. Anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, that reinforces sort of the the like ahistorical sense of online, where it's like something that the book came out during the Trump administration. This wasn't like 50 years ago, and yet for some people that's ancient history. So. Okay, so can you say a little bit more about The Signal and what it is?
Sure.
And
so it covers it's not just the U.S. It has sort of a more global perspective, and there's politics, there's economics, and there's culture, or sort of like the main general headings of things. I tend to write in the culture area, and what we do are a lot of Q&As with interesting people about their ideas and things they've written. So like the most recent thing I did that just appeared was I did a Q&A with the food writer Alicia Kennedy about sort of like can sustainable eating avoid being just sort of like a snob fest. And we also discussed why people get very mad online. So this is in keeping with our theme about peanut butter, because she had a great newsletter about people being mad at her for using/promoting natural peanut butter. And I had not known that peanut butter could be so contentious. And
because of the allergy stuff, or like the way it's manufactured?
I would have thought, no, it's to do with, I guess, there's natural peanut butter, which is like it doesn't have other stuff in it. And then there's a kind that has palm oil and sugar added. And I guess people who like with the palm oil and sugar added get very annoyed at the people who don't. And somehow, even though these two food products are both cheap and at the supermarket and not a big deal, and if you're not allergic to peanuts, you can just go to town, I guess it's like considered snooty to get the natural one. And I was telling her, I was talking to her that of all the things I buy, like I don't buy a lot of snooty stuff, but snooty food products, sure. And like, I think that, like, I mean, I'm telling you now, like, I'm thinking like the cheese I buy is like much more embarrassing than anything I could get in a peanut butter aisle. But yeah, so that's what we do. We do Q&As, not all about peanut butter. But that was kind of fun.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. And I'm a Skippy man myself, but I'll have to, maybe I'll reevaluate things after that.
Ingredients list.
Right. And there's something, is it something about the manufacture or extraction of palm oil that it's possibly the people who farm it are treated badly?
It is not good for labor, apparently, according to people who have looked into it a bit more than I have.
Right. Okay, so everything is fraught.
Everything is fraught.
Which ties into our topic, which is...
Yes.
Oh, but first I just want to say, I'm throwing that segue out. congrats on the new job, and also it's good
you.
after a year in which there was a lot of like websites going out of business and stuff. Seeing a new website starting up is a positive sign, and so
I have to pinch myself for all of this because it doesn't. Yeah, I am aware of the landscape in which this is, and I'm very happy with what I'm doing and to be doing it for sure. And the site is very interesting, and I urge everyone you can sign up. You give them your email when you sign up into the website, and then you can read the articles, basically, is the idea. And there's also paid subscription option, but you'll see on the website, and I guess you'll link, right?
Yes, and so that the URL is thesgnl.com for the signal. And there'll be links below. Okay, so we're gonna start off. Okay, so our general topic is Twitter, and there's always a lot to talk about there, and things have changed there over the past couple months in various ways, and you and I both are on there a lot, and so I thought you'd be a good person.
I have an account, but I have never used it.
Yeah, you glance at it once in a while. But you wrote a piece. So we're gonna be talking about Twitter in general, but let's start off with this piece you wrote for the Signal, which will be linked below, called "Quote Cleanse Your Timeline," and the first line, I think that I quoted out the first line here, is somewhere along the way a consensus emerged online that posting unserious content to one's social media feeds demanded disclaimers. So what is the timeline cleanse, and why did you want to write about it?
Sure. Well, I just kept noticing, this was, I guess, around the election, but also just during the pandemic in general, and also just during every single day, which is, like, people will post things like, I'm tired, or like we're all miserable right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's just this kind of consensus that today is particularly the worst day of all time, and that we are all upset about the same thing, to the point that it's almost like gratuitous to say why, because like clearly everybody knows that we are all upset about X, and nobody could possibly have been offline for 10 minutes and missed that. But what I started noticing though recently was that whenever I would see like a cute animal photo, speaking of animals, there's one growling at the snow. Yeah, that people would post cute animal photos, or sometimes it would be like babies or just sort of other innocuous content. And they would say, to cleanse your timeline, here's a photo of some ponies, here's a photo of a kitten. And it would be like, it's something about it was like, this is just some flaw in my personality, but I was like, oh, what is this? Like, why does this have to be about cleanse your timeline? Like, why does there have to be this kind of hedging? Why can't you just put the picture? Like, if I put a picture of my dog on Twitter, I put a picture of my dog. And I recognize that that's not serious content, and that somebody might see above and below my dog some kind of atrocities, but maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they see another dog. Maybe they see a different animal. But it just seemed like this thing about cleanse your timeline seemed to be like, it annoyed me as this sort of like feelings projection, like telling you that you're mad or upset, or like that you're feeling high blood pressure and that you need this kind of calming. And it just like something about the presumptuousness of it kind of like riled me a little, but also it seemed just like in a sort of non-riled way. It just seemed like an interesting thing that this is like, that people would feel that they know this about the people who are following their tweets. And you don't know, like, that's the whole thing with social media. Like, by definition, you don't know what other people see when they log on. So you don't know that they're all, so it's like, it's projection, maybe. Like, it's like, if you think all you've been looking at is horrible stuff. So I don't really have an answer to what it is. Like, is it that people are only seeing bad stuff, like upsetting news stories in their own timelines, and thus they assume everybody is? Is it that they think one ought to be only reading upsetting things, and that you need to almost like apologize if you talk about something else? I don't really have an answer. This wasn't a piece where I like investigate. I didn't like track down why people post this. I just kind of, speculated a little with some guesses. Yeah.
And I think you locate, I guess from the Know Your Meme website, maybe the first instance of this, which was 2013. So not that long ago, and Twitter was a going concern, for a number of years before that. So okay, so maybe the opposite, or maybe the way cleanse your timeline fits in is part of doom scrolling.
Yes,
which I think was coined last year, or at least popularized last year, and that became sort of like, I don't know, it's a good term. It's an evocative term, and it's just like, constantly running your thumb up and down to see what bad thing has just happened. And a lot of bad things did happen in 2020.
That's fair.
So it made, and we were also all stuck at home most of the time because
we
of the pandemic.
still are here in Toronto.
Yes.
It's still lockdown.
Yes. So in most places, probably people are spending more time, alone or just with their household members and more time to stare at your phone, basically. So cleanse your timeline is like the momentary, respite from everything bad that was happening, and a lot of bad things. Like, one of 2020, one of the worst years in, since in American history since 1945. I would say.
And bad in a way that really, like, very, very few, if anybody, has been totally spared. I mean, like, there are people who have it less bad, and that's about the most you can say.
Yeah,
I'd say about 2020.
So I think it's, where do I want to go with this? So it's interesting, sort of like Twitter as performance, and something like what are we all, the people who are on Twitter, what are we all doing on there? And so everything, you like a cynical perspective, you like everything is a way to, everything you tweet is a way to like make yourself feel better or elevate your social standing or gain more clout or get likes and retweets. And so the person who's posting the pictures of the miniature horses who are wearing outfits, they don't really care about people's timelines getting cleansed. They just want the likes and the retweets and new followers. And so that's the most sort of cynical, and maybe this isn't even like a conscious strategy or something.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's what, like, Twitter has this sort of gamified aspect to it, where if you go viral, suddenly, like, you're getting these tiny little, like, positive reinforcements, and also, depending on what you said, maybe negative reinforcements, but just like things are happening. And especially if you're stuck inside all the time and there's a monotony, it seems like something is happening when this happens, even though very little is actually happening.
Oh, for sure. So I definitely want to pick up on what you said about this not necessarily being conscious, because that was something that I was having trouble sort of conveying when writing about this, because I'm not like mad at people who post this. You know what I mean? It's not like I would go through and be like, oh, you did that. Like, I never would have thought this person would, it was not like that at all. I think it's that it's become a habit. It's become a kind of trope. It's a thing. It's like any other meme or something. It goes with the picture now. It's just like, it fits. Like, you're going to post a cute picture, you put cleanse your timeline. Like, here's a cute picture, cleanse your timeline. They're just the same, basically. So I don't think that on an individual basis, people are thinking like, I better make it seem like I've been reading all about, the whatever, like the latest new, the South African and UK variants and their exact stats, at this point. And then that I want to make sure my followers know I took this little minute. No, I don't think people are thinking about it on that level, but I think there's something about the fact that this caught on and that people don't sort of challenge it or find it mysterious. You know what I mean? Like, if you see cleanse your timeline, it's clear that that's a reference to the doom scrolling situation and to things being terrible. And it does fit, I think, with a broader thing on Twitter of like, when people share good news, they start with this everything is terrible, but or if they just share something silly, it's like there's everything is terrible, but, and it's not that things have not been, certainly in 2020, but even before some of this preceded this, it's just some sort of habit of Twitter. And also what you were saying about people being stuck at home, I think is very true. And I think, that there are these sort of competing urges to say like Twitter's not real life, there's more going on, but it's like for a lot of people, this is it. And I mean, that's, I think whether you're living alone or living with people you've been locked inside with for a year. It's like if you're not going anywhere, like Twitter's kind of it. And I think it was already the case a bit, but like they're really like everything that was kind of counterbalancing that disappeared.
Right. Yeah, and I've certainly...
Or the people who use it, and then if you're not on it, obviously, something else.
Yeah. And probably, well, I don't know, probably most people were looking at their social media on their phone more in 2020 than they were in 2019 because of the lockdown. So, I mean, one aspect of this that's interesting is like Twitter specifically versus the other social media apps. And so, like, do people do this on Instagram? I don't think
so
they
I
do.
looked into this a little bit, as in like I did searches, and it does exist. But Instagram, so I use it for like dog pictures, and I'm very active in like poodle Instagram,
You're almost you or your dog are a poodle Instagram influencer almost, I would say.
Well, except that it's a locked account, which kind of gets in the way of influencing.
Okay.
It doesn't have very many followers. It's like a bunch of people with gray poodles in like Japan, China, Scandinavia, and Russia. Occasionally they'll be in the States. And there's like one or two in Canada.
Okay, so global influence. Your dog at least has global influence.
Huge influence.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say with that is that like nobody's saying as a disclaimer, there's no assumption that anybody isn't with these accounts posting photos of their gray poodle, sometimes an apricot poodle. You know what I mean? Like there's just no pretense that there's something else going on. So occasionally you'll see things that are just like, where it's just like my Twitter brain pops up when I'm on Instagram, and I'll see something where somebody's put like a very earnest, like Black Lives Matter slogan and with like a black poodle or something, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it just seems like they're trying for something earnest, but it's like, it doesn't quite work because it's poodle Instagram and they're not quite leaving that sphere. But in general, the point is that like, it wasn't that, but it was something along those lines, and I wish I would have remembered exactly.
If someone posted that on Twitter, and maybe someone did, like black poodle, Black Lives Matter, like they would go viral, and it would not be for good reasons. It would be like torn
That's
apart.
true. Well, I think on Instagram there's just a little bit. Well, there's maybe, I'm sure there's different types of Twitter too. So maybe there's a Twitter where people are just putting animal photos and not apologizing. But I think Twitter lends itself to this sort of like, we are all miserable consensus. And I don't think it's necessarily an incorrect assumption all of the time, but there's just something about it that reinforces, like the assumption reinforces the misery.
Yeah.
And like, it just sucks you in. Like, I'm sorry, I do not work at the New York Times. I do not need to know what's going on internally there. And it's like bombarding, like I tweeted last night to quote, I'm gonna be super, super dorky with this, but like that should I watch like bad British television, or should I read like 200,000 tweets about what's going on at these media companies? Because I was like listening to the Bon Appetit Reply All podcast while like reading all these tweets about like the New York Times. It's like, I don't need to know this, but it sucks you in. Yeah.
And so, yeah, why do we know or care at all about, various people being hired or fired at the New York Times? I mean, in one way it is important because it's like the paper of record, et cetera. But also it's because the people you like, if you are into following the news or media figures, those people care. If you work at the Washington Post, then maybe you care about what happens at the New York Times internally because you want to get hired there someday or something. So they're talking about it, and then there are weirdo type people who would never work in national media, but they also care about it because in the same way that like a fan of a sports team would care about like who the assistant general manager of the sports team is. There's kind of like yes, there's that, but yeah, and then it of course tribalizes because Twitter is so tribal. I mean, I just wanted to like years ago on Twitter, I joked like, do people who like use Pinterest a lot, do they ever call Pinterest the hell site? Or say, like, release me from this hell site? Like, probably not. They seem to, like, enjoy using it, and they like posting photos of, knitwear or whatever.
And what's interesting about that is lifestyle sites do get controversy and have all sorts of, like, culture wars things going on. So it's not that because Pinterest is kind of like maybe more female, more sort of crafts type focus. It doesn't. I don't think that's it. I think there's something about Twitter specifically.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. It's something about the form of it, and also the type of people who are drawn to it, and the strange mixture of, you know, powerful people like former President Donald Trump, who maybe we'll talk about in a few minutes, and also just lots of random people and people who are concealing their identity and all sorts of weirdos in between.
People who may or may not be from Queens. You mean?
Well, let's not talk about that. But also, like, so on my Instagram, the people I follow, my account, I almost entirely follow close friends or cute animal accounts, and so that's it. So almost everything I see on Instagram is positive. And if like a close friend started posting a lot of like political memes or something, I would probably mute them, because I just don't want to see that on Instagram. I go to it when I want to see, you know, various like English setter accounts that I followed over the past couple of years since my own English setter had to be put to sleep. So like that's what I use that just to look at cute animals.
But that's upsetting in a different way potentially, no?
Well, I've gone long enough that I just like enjoy looking at English setters, and also you know, like birds. The national parks and Fish and Wildlife Service have really great accounts where it's just, you know, beautiful nature photos. And, you know, the Audubon Society. So yeah, that's my feed there. And then on Twitter, I probably see kind of the same sort of things that you see, where it's people who are angry all the time, people who are fighting each other.
Fighting each other. Oh my goodness. And then I just feel like there's always this sort of, normally it's like an implied whose team are you on, whose side are you on, who's your friend, who, you know, but like, occasionally, and I did ultimately, I believe, unfollow in one case over this, like somebody will be like specifically inviting you to get in the, you know, in the mix and like say like what you think about this person's interaction with that person. And it's like, I think that you can only ever just sit these things out unless like there's some very specific reason it has to do with you. But I feel like there's this, like you can feel like you have to, like with this J.K. Rowling stuff, I have not read Harry Potter, but I always felt like I was supposed to have like incredibly, and I still feel like this, like why do I not have a take on her specifically? And it's like, because I don't know about it, and I'm sitting this one out. Like it's not that I don't think there are like important issues. I think you should be allowed to sit something out, and there isn't a sense on Twitter that you are.
Yeah, and so cleanse your timeline is a way to sort of indicate like I'm taking a brief 3-second break from the discourse, and here's a photo of a cat. And yeah, something there's almost everything involving Twitter is stupid in some way, but one of the stupidest is this idea that like you have to comment on everything, and like, you know, silence is violence or something. Like if you're not weighing in on this particular issue, then you've somehow like trespassed across a moral line, which is just so stupid, because, you know, pre-social media, there was no way for any average person, aside from writing a letter to the editor of their local newspaper, to like comment on a national issue in a way that was like beyond their immediate social circle. So this is all new. And then there's, you know, so it's like, should normal people feel like they have to do this? People who are not connected to the media in any way, but just are on social media, like that is totally stupid.
But this I have seen where people really, I'm thinking of a couple instances where people have like said it's very telling that people are not, who are like in media or who are at this or whatever, are not commenting on such and such story. And it'll be like, on my timeline, they are, you know, like, have you really like it just might be saying, you know, more about who you're following or whatever. And I think this, or like the whole nobody's talking about, where maybe there's a news story, maybe that was, you know, shared as famously the case, where people say nobody's talking about this underreported thing, and they link to the Times, and, you know, but like, yeah, I think there is a lot of this. So I think people do read willful intent. However, I think most of the time, and this is something I was tweeting about earlier, which my second ever tweet, right? And my second ever tweet, I tweeted something about that, like, people are not paying that much attention to what one another are doing at the level. Like there's this, on the one hand, the sense that everybody's watching you at all times and cares. But on the other, like there's this plea for attention that mixes with this kind of like, don't look at what I'm doing impulse. Because like you want people to look at what you're doing if they're going to be happy with it, but you don't if they're not. So like somebody who I follow and who follows me on Twitter had tweeted something about like that if you say something negative about the woke baby books, like so in this John McWhorter book excerpt, he was saying something like you can't criticize those, and she was saying I've tweeted about it, nobody canceled me, and I was like, I've written an article about it, but nobody canceled me. Like I think most people don't even care what other people are doing, and
Right.
you know, you can say a lot of things. You just never know. I think it's that you never know. Like unless you really are somebody on some sort of pedestal, you never know who's going to suddenly be listening, who had some personal grievance with you from years ago that you don't even remember. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of an annoying tick of discourse of the past couple of years is saying you can't talk about, like people saying, like, why can't we talk about this? Or no one, like, you're not allowed to say this, and then they say it. And one person who does this sometimes is Glenn Loury, another person who's on this platform, so he's like a tenured professor, he can say whatever he wants, but like suddenly, because of information technology, like anyone can say anything they want at any time. And like you said, probably if they're an average person, it's like talking to a hole. But maybe if they say something strange or really stupid, then it goes viral and they get like dunked on and their life is, ruined forever or at least made shitty for some period of time. Yeah. But like, if this was 1990, like I would have no platform to spew my thoughts in anyway, because, if I wasn't employed by a magazine or a newspaper or something or a television station, then someone who had like no real credentials couldn't just pontificate. So, anyone can say anything about anything.
And it's unedited. So in the past, it would be that if you have some kind of column or whatever TV spot, there's some sort of check on what you can say, whereas now it's like unfiltered, unedited.
Yeah, so the gatekeepers of, the broadcast news station or the radio station or the newspaper would prevent you from, maybe saying something really crazy or writing a column that would like get you in such trouble that you would, your friends wouldn't want to talk to you anymore or something. They'd be like, hey, we're not going to run this one. Whereas today the incentive would be like, let that column run because then it'll go viral and we'll get a lot of traffic from everyone hate reading it. So the incentives are all messed up. But you, at the end of this piece, you note that like, like we tweeters, we people of the Twitter tribe, who are we working for? And this idea of like, you need to do the work is sort of has become this cliche, but like, who are we working for and who actually, like, who benefits, cui bono or whatever from all this stuff? And
is it just Twitter?
Is it just Twitter?
Right.
Or what is the point of all this? And what I want to say, there's if you tweet something, probably like nothing will happen. Like 99.99% of the time, like there's almost no reaction for anyone. And then like there's a very small chance that you tweet something and then like you really fuck up and suddenly everyone in the world knows who you are, like Bean Dad or something. And although he had some public platform before this,
right.
But yeah. So and then like why are we doing this? What is the upside? Why like there's the small bits of dopamine or whatever serotonin that you get when people like your thing or retweet it or respond to your joke in a positive way, but the risk reward ratio seems way off for the average person. Maybe a media provocateur type, likes to stir stuff up. And I'm thinking of this guy John Kay, who you're probably familiar with, who had this tweet.
Yeah, I know John Kay.
He had this tweet where unclear whether he was serious or joking, but
dog shampoo. I think he was joking.
Okay, so he posted a photo of
like, this has taken on a life of its own.
Yes, he posted a photo of dog shampoo and said something like, I can't believe I've been using this the whole time. I didn't realize it's for dogs. And there's a photo of a golden retriever on the label. So it seems so absurdly dumb, but it was so like sort of straight face.
He was making fun of himself, I think. So here's my theory. I think he really was using the dog shampoo. He also like I mean, I should say, like, he's a man with like quite short hair. He's not, as you can all, confirm for yourselves on, I think he was on like Fox News.
Yeah, so last night he was on
Yeah.
Fox News, and it was like liberals attack dog shampoo user or something.
This is the biggest Toronto story in a while. This is like the biggest thing to happen in my city in a long time. So I'm kind of excited. And I think, yeah, it's amazing, yeah, how long this has lasted. But
Okay, so it's not way it benefits John Kay, who was like an editor at Quillette or something, to like stir up shit, and then he ends up on Fox News. But for the average person, or even people like who are vaguely attached to the media world, like, what is really the benefit of tweeting out your thoughts when you're more like the chance that something bad happens seems to vastly outweigh the chance of something good happening.
This is true. So I think it's a lot of different things going on. I think for people who are truly nothing to do with media at all, don't aspire to have a job in media, are just like they're well set up in whatever they're doing that's something else. So I'm thinking especially of like a lot of lawyers who seem to spend a lot of time on Twitter, and obviously don't need to for their work. It only seems like it could hurt them. I don't know why they're on Twitter.
There's a lot of anonymous lawyers
or anonymous
on
lawyers,
Twitter who have
right?
attained some level, who become like media adjacent figures, like Southpaw, that guy, and yeah, there's a bunch of other ones who, well, I think that guy's like self-doxed or something at some point, revealed who he actually was, but yeah, so it both makes you think that like there's a lot of lawyers out there with a lot of free time on their hands who can spend time tweeting constantly and amassing all this clout. But yeah, sorry, continue.
All parents who are like, go to law school, this supports their like, because and if the retort was, but it seems like then you're overworked, it's terrible. It's like, but they're all on Twitter.
Yeah, go to law school because you might become an anonymous, Twitter influencer in 20 years.
But I think for that, I think it's sort of the proximity to micro celebrity, or like to people who seem very important in a small arena. And, if that's the arena you're spending time in, like it can, like I remember having like, I think a tweet of mine was liked by Nigella Lawson once. And I was just like, oh, you know what I mean? But I think people have this on different scales and in different areas. So I think that's some of it. But I think there's a...
Well, sorry, just to interrupt. I just want to, my version of that is that one time, the guy who was the child actor in The Sixth Sense liked one of my tweets. No. So that, not quite as good as Nigella Lawson, but that was pretty good.
I think that's better.
I actually heard him on a comedy podcast within the past year or so. He's actually a very funny, smart guy. He seems to have not been damaged by being a child actor in the way that many others are. So that's
great. Sorry. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, but I think then there's people who like, and I can definitely at times include myself in this category, who like are media. Well, not currently, because now I actually like have a job in media, but when I was in grad school, or at times when I was like freelancing and home with a baby, times in my life when I was not, or when I was teaching full time at U of T, like Twitter I would feel like I was in the game in some way. And I never knew if I was or wasn't. I never knew to what extent I was fooling myself and putting labor in where I should have been just like pitching articles or applying for, jobs that might have perhaps interested me. But then it would be like people would get in touch through Twitter and be like, do you want to, like write something? Do you like all sorts of editors and things? So like it became this kind of thing where like, was it networking and useful and even indispensable for whatever amount of a writing career I was having? Mm-hmm. Or was I just throwing ideas and time into some kind of pit? And I don't know if I have an answer. I think like I never had any problems from it. Like I like tweeting something where people were mad in any sort of sustained way, but it felt more like a time suck, but then when I've had jobs where I'm, in journalism, it's like you need it for connections and ideas and things like that. You kind of, you can't just totally ignore it. You can try, but yeah, it's very difficult. And certainly in the types of things I write about it would be weird to willfully pretend there wasn't Twitter. But right. Yeah, I do think it just takes up a lot of time. I think that's why it's, Oliver Bateman idea, like the doing the work. you feel like you're working, and you are in a way, but it can be a whole day, and you can have realized the day has gone by and you've just been on Twitter. And I don't know. I don't know. It's probably not good.
Yeah, it's definitely not good. I'm ready to definitively say that. Yeah, I mean, I think something that maybe that scholars should look at is, I mentioned it earlier, is like this gamified aspect of Twitter, where it's like you're sort of getting little points, and you sort of feel like you need to be like in the mix or in the game to participate in this game where you're attracting little bits of clout or whatever we want to call them. But like, and I noticed this, not to brag or anything, but the past couple weeks I had like one or two tweets that went somewhat viral, and I realized that like and this, for people who have like big accounts, I have no idea how they do this. You must turn all their notifications off. But if you have your notifications on, and then you're getting like over 100 retweets, then you're getting like just these little bits of data like in your phone, and you're seeing just something. And I realized that when that happens, I'm not checking the timeline as much, because I'm just getting these little bits of like reinforcement of like, oh, someone thought this joke I made was funny. And so I'm paying less attention to like what's the latest thing in the past 45 seconds that someone tweeted about. So this is like, I guess, sort of an addiction dynamic I'm describing here, where it's like I just need some reinforcement, whether it's what's the latest news item, what's the latest joke or meme, what's the latest timeline cleanse picture of miniature ponies wearing sweaters, but then if I'm getting like, if just something is happening, then it feels like, my attention has been captured. And and there was this piece in the Times a couple weeks ago about this guy that coined the term attention economy, who was a scholar who was sort of like an outsider scholar, never became super famous for this idea, but like seemed to be very prescient in the way it predicted how the internet would reshape things. And yeah, it does seem like when you write something on Twitter, you're like taking like this micro slice of your followers' attention, and then you're like, I did that, and everyone else is doing it at the same time. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's definitely bad, like for my personal psychology and my like loved ones and everything else in life. Like, and it's probably bad. I mean, the good things are like, I think we probably like maybe we first connected on Twitter. Like most of the people I've had on this podcast, like I approached them through Twitter
I definitely met Kat through Twitter. My co-host for Feminine Chaos.
Yeah, Kat Rosenfield. Yeah, I think. I think probably I reached out to her the first time I had her on through Twitter, so that's good. And I think this podcast is does something for its listeners. I hope listeners and viewers. And then like I have made some friendships of people through Twitter, but yeah, I think it's mostly weighing the positive versus negative. It's mostly negative, and then if we consider it like that, and the fact that I'm still looking at it every day, then it's like the addiction sort of thing makes more sense of like. I can quit whatever I want to, or something along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. I know, but then like, if you go off it for a day or something because you're just busy, and then you go back on it, what I find is that like I'm expecting to have a million notifications, and I have like none. And then it's like if you don't play, nobody's paying attention. Even if you have, I don't have that many followers, but enough where I would have thought. But like,
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So it's like. It's slot machine sort of thing where you need to keep on pumping in quarters as like your own tweets contributing to the entire mess, or else you're not going to get any payoff whatsoever. And yeah, you seem like you've fallen out of the system. So that's all bad. So something else I wanted to talk about in relation to this is, okay, so this idea I had, and I'm sure other people have pointed this out, that like, Twitter encourages sort of marginal, extremist, like obscure points of view, ideas, habits, cultural products. Like it inflates these or political positions. Just the way it works, like those sort of things thrive on there, which is, in some ways. Okay, so let's bring this into Trump. So Trump was kicked off of Twitter a month or so ago. And I thought that was good when it happened. And I think it's even better today in mid-February. And so I'm happy that he got kicked off. And if he hadn't been president, he would have been kicked off before. But like, you know, his personal strangeness and like the fact that he was an outsider of the political system, like that's the fact that he used Twitter to fuel his rise. Like that fits in with this thesis because he's a weird guy who would tweet these weird things. You know, he had all these famous tweets about like his feud with Graydon Carter and, you know, how he was addicted to Diet Coke and stuff. All these got like deleted en masse, but his, you know, his like marginal identity, like Twitter transformed that into sort of a mainstream thing. And then he became president, which is stupid and insane. So the thing that, made me think about this was there was a tweet, that was basically about Andrew Yang, who was running for New York City mayor. And I guess in his platform, when he ran for the Democratic nomination, he was against BDS, which is the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement or program that is against the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. And maybe there's more to it than that, but that's the simplified version. And so Yang, I guess, on his original campaign website or something, he had an anti-BDS statement. And then, so the cartoonist Matt Lubchansky tweeted like a screenshot of this and just the line, "Get fucked, dude." And so that went semi-viral, 200 retweets, 1.8 thousand likes. And it just made me think, like, you know, BDS is a marginal political movement that is trying to, you know, change things, but it's definitely, I would say, if you know, probably the vast majority of Americans have never heard of it. And if you explain to them in a neutral way what it was, they would probably be anti-BDS, I don't know, like 75-25 or something, because Americans like Israel for all sorts of complicated reasons, or not so complicated reasons. And so, but the fact that Lubchansky...
Wait, we're going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict today, right? Just checking.
Right, so Lubchansky was like, you know, fuck this shit. And then there were 2,000 other people who were like, yeah, fuck this shit. But Andrew Yang, whether running for the Democratic nomination for the entire nation or just running for mayor in New York City, like coming out in support of BDS would be very, very surprising. So it's basically the standard political. Maybe, I guess, I actually tweeted something at Lubchansky like, how many was there anyone pro BDS, or how many like within the 30 odd candidates, you know, who ran for president in 2020? And he said, they said no, but I guess Yang wanted to go like a step further in this. I'll link to the tweet, but it just made me think, you know, everything, any sort of strange, extreme, unusual perspective is overrepresented on Twitter. I don't know why exactly. It's something to do with the mechanics of small groups or something. But you see all sorts of just weirdos and freaks in any category. You could take politics entirely out of it. The people who like really, really care about one particular minor character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and think that particular character should have more exposure, and they are fighting with people who support other characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, just all sorts of freaks are on this website. And then it is strange to think that the president of the United States used this weird website and communications platform as his primary means of getting information out for 4 years. That's bizarre.
It is.
And so Trump is gone, and is it possible that Twitter can recede into being more of just a niche weirdo thing for people who want to fight with each other about which Marvel Cinematic Universe character should get the next movie and are very exercised about that? And we can kind of be like, oh, this is stupid and this shouldn't matter. And yeah, so I sorry, this is just rolling out of me. So what, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, this is a whole bunch of different topics, and I guess I have thoughts probably on all of them. First, is in terms of Trump. I mean, apart from like whatever I thought, I don't even know. Like, what I would noticed is like we were listening to Canadian public radio this morning, and suddenly like there was some clip of Trump speaking, and I was just like saying like I'd almost forgotten about him. Like, I think there's something where because he's not on Twitter, the effect of this has been, you know, because there's so much of, I never followed Trump on Twitter. I never I didn't go to the pains to like block or mute, but whatever. But so much of like Twitter was just responding to him, quote tweeting him, screenshotting him, all of this. But I feel like because he's not on Twitter now, that's just kind of like it feels done in a way that it wouldn't if he still were.
Right. And one of the other strange things that Trump pioneered is it used to be understood that a famous person or a politician would not write their own tweets, especially the president. And there used to be this convention for when Obama was president that his tweets would be signed -BO for the ones that he supposedly wrote himself, though he probably wasn't actually writing them himself, but maybe he had to approve them or something. But whereas like Trump, we knew that the majority of his things, he was actually typing them out himself on his phone. And so that was very strange. And that made it seem like, this thing that like was previously used by politicians and powerful people as like a way to put out little short press release sort of messages. Instead it became like the glimpse into his id of this very unusual person who somehow became president. And that just became like that dynamic, which was so strange, made the entire thing seem much more important than like logic would dictate that it should be.
For sure. I mean, I think Trump's whole thing was being like the uncancelable, he can just say anything and people like him, the people who like him, I should say, like him all the more for it, and kind of live vicariously through that, so that he could just say anything on Twitter. It would kind of fit in with that. In terms of the extreme views, I have noticed this as well. And I would say specifically where Israel is concerned, even though I follow plenty of people who are either Israeli or Zionist identified, I get the impression anecdotally from Twitter that basically 99% of the population thinks Israel is an apartheid evil state not from 1967, from its origins, that it's terrible, should never have happened. It's the most evil thing in the world. That is my impression from Twitter, from what people think on Twitter.
Right, so that's probably
what people think on Twitter. It's not my impression of
Israel. In American discourse, I don't know about Canadian discourse, that would be 2% or something of people who would go along with.
I think it's a little more in Canada, but I also don't know how plugged in I am to Canada in that area specifically. I mean, I guess, although a few of the people I'm thinking of actually are Canadian, but you would have the impression that like to say something like if I referenced having been in Israel, that I would be like, that the world would be furious, not the world, but like specifically like the States, and I don't think that doesn't quite add up to how people see things. I think academia also, like we've talked about media, but academia is pretty well represented, I think, on Twitter. And sort of academia broadly defined. So like that could be somebody who's like going in and out of their grad program for 15 years. It doesn't matter, like people with some sort of affiliation, even just sort of a sense of affiliation with academia are also pretty present. So yeah, I think views that are like common there also maybe are more seen. So that's part of it. But yeah, that is that like there's currency in making people super mad. But there is a sense that people are going to be mad at things that they probably will on Twitter, but like wouldn't off Twitter. And something like having a sort of neutral to positive view of Israel would be the sort of thing that would seem like
or telling a story about how your daughter was hungry and there was a can of beans. And she didn't know how to use the can opener. So we won't get into the whole, I mean, you guys on your podcast talked about Bean Dad discourse, but that is another thing where something that was essentially a joke that didn't land. And I don't know what other form it could have, like you could imagine sort of an Andy Rooney columnist or something writing this out. And instead it became, this huge thing. I wonder if, the fact that Trump is gone, Bean Dad happened did Bean Dad happen before or after Trump? I mean, before or after they banned Trump? I think it was slightly before, right?
Probably.
I think it was just a couple days before, and then people were joking.
It was all around the same time.
Bean Dad was happy that suddenly the insurrectionists were storming the Capitol.
Right. I remember that. Okay, yes, that's right. So it would have been before. Okay,
so this, I guess, this contradicts this thesis I was just developing, but now that Trump is gone, and the main thing that people were agitated about for 4 years is off the platform. One thing that could happen is the general level of agitation and fighting and stuff goes down somewhat because the instigator is gone, or it like disperses into various other corners of people going after Bean Dad anti-bean dad, pro-bean dad in all little corners. I think in general, and I've been saying this for a while, that like Biden is going to return America to normalcy, and probably a lot of people who are really energized either pro or anti-Trump over the past couple of years, like, you know, resistance moms and MAGA uncles together are going to sort of return, or at least try to return back to their normal lives and back to their old hobbies and stuff. And and so the overall level of heat and so forth will go down somewhat. That'd be my prediction.
That could be. I mean, so when I wrote my book, I wrote it during the Obama administration. It appeared just at the start of the Trump administration. So these culture wars were going. However, they were nothing. It was like niche. I had to explain like why I was writing about this niche thing. And I feel like it might return to that with Biden. It's possible. Or things are just kind of shifting. Like there's a lot of this sort of anti-political correctness strand of things seems to have a life of its own that seems maybe that could be energized by Biden, right? Because if Biden has, you know, like executive orders or just general rhetoric that suggests, you know, like that he's on one team, maybe there's pushback. But I don't know. I don't think but there's no personality like that with Trump. You know, there's no sort of constant stream of completely absurd, whatever that all was. Yeah. So probably will calm down, or it'll just return to being niche, right?
Yeah,
because I think that's what it did. Like Trump got like what you're saying with like the resistance, and MAGA teams of things. Like I think what happened with Trump is there was suddenly like you had to care, even if you were a normie, you had to care, you know. And like I think it might now revert to like if you're a normie, you can do something else.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's the dream, I think. The normies return to their lives.
The dream is to be a normie, but I don't know.
Well, I think at least I'm too far gone, but
I don't know.
I will speak for you. But yeah, I mean, a lot of Trump brought a lot of people into caring about politics on both his supporters and his opponents. And so
he made it accessible, I think, is that he made it seem like, I used to think you have to understand about like policies and court cases and all of this. And I would try to be informed, but I feel like I wasn't ever really like enough of a wonk to really know what's going on. Like, I don't know like the name of like the person in the House of Representatives from that county, like how, you know, and I've always felt like there were these other people who did. And Trump made it like really basic. Like you could be an idiot and follow this. And that was not only fine, but encouraged. And I feel like maybe if things move away from that, then that will just automatically alienate people from politics because, you know,
it's less exciting.
It's more like this dry thing, right?
I mean, part of the like a huge crazy thing about the Trump years was that there was a sense that at any given time he could do something or say something that would be totally off the wall, and everyone had to intensely care about it. And sometimes what he said actually did matter, and sometimes it didn't matter, and then it would just go on, and 36 hours later it would go on to the next crazy thing he said, because he was a nonstop, you know, font of craziness. So that's gone, and he's been silenced more or less. Although, as I was joking in the period between when he was kicked off Twitter and ended his presidency, you know, if there was some way he could like release short statements to the press, then he could like get his point of view out there. So obviously he like had a press secretary, et cetera, and could have called up any news station and gotten on the air because he was the president. So it was just this bizarre situation. But I mean, just one other note on this, like if you, in 2014 or something, you could have said if a politician wanted to have the biggest possible platform, they would go on Facebook, because Facebook is like just, globally much like 5, 10, 15, 20 times bigger than Twitter. Much, normal people are much more likely to be on Facebook than the freaks and weirdos on Twitter. And you can write, Trump, at the beginning of the Trump presidency, is still 140 characters. Like you could write an actual statement, or you could post a longer video or something. I guess there's certain accounts have certain privileges about posting videos of certain lengths on Twitter. But, that's your mass audience, because everyone and their mom and their grandmom are on Facebook. But like Trump showed that there was this way to sort of hijack this other system, and he was a demented master of it. And and then one of the other weird things is like I assume he doesn't actually like never actually used a computer, doesn't know how to use a computer, so he would use Twitter on his phone, but I don't think he even had a Facebook app. So it would be his staff that was running any other social media account, and they probably sanded down the edges and took some of the crazy all caps sort of stuff and wouldn't propagate that on the other things. But yeah, so I mean, Trump is strange in so many ways, but he does sort of seem like a one-off figure, and you couldn't really imagine the system being hijacked again in this same way.
No,
I don't know.
I don't think so. No. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fewer people than Facebook, but it's much more sort of concentrated media, right? So like it wasn't necessarily a bad strategy for him.
Obviously it worked at least once.
I mean, like he was addressing the people who were going to then write an article about it and did.
Yeah. And one of the strange things is like, it's not like Trump would participate in memes or reply to people's, posts or interact in the way that an average user of Twitter would. It was that he is the president, or he was running for president, and then he became president, and everyone, he would tweet something, and then all the reporters were forced to cover it because he is the president. And when the president says something or tweets something, it's important. Or at least that's the theory. But it's not like he, was doing like hashtag games or, was doing other things that, Twitter encourages you to do. He just, it was like he hacked the media basically through a back door.
Yeah. Yeah. But
so
he
he's a kind of
get a
demented
second
genius.
term out of it.
Right. Although, he lost, in 2018, he lost very strongly. And then in 2020 lost even more strongly. So he's gone. But I actually did want to bring up something that I became obsessed with over the past year, looking at my phone, which was the Trump reply guys and the MAGA QAnon supporting people, some of whom were basically seemed like more or less normal people. Maybe some of them were actually Russian bots, but they seemed like they were actual people, and they loved Trump so much. And so on any Trump reply, the algorithm decides which would be the first ones you see. And so there were these strange people, the Krasensteins, I don't know if you remember them, who were sort of like resistance type people. They were identical twins, and they would always be like, within seconds of any Trump tweet, they would reply something like, "How dare you, sir? Like, don't you know that the 12th Amendment, blah blah blah." And and so they were kicked off a couple years ago because they were running some sort of scam of having multiple accounts or something. And then so they were the main sort of like resistance, and people call them the resistance grifters of these people who would always reply and were trying to monetize their opposition to Trump. And then there were some people who were always the positive reply guys to Trump, and there were these two accounts that I became somewhat obsessed with and would troll them. And one of them blocked me, but
there's no hope for you. You're not going to be.
I know. I'm gone. But I had some strange fascination with these characters of the people who, these people had no established platform, but they somehow amassed, like 250,000 followers because they would reply to Trump like, yes, greatest president ever. Like, we support you 100%. And then, so last year I started, screen capping the bios of a lot of these people, more like the average, MAGA or QAnon type person, because the way they wrote their Twitter bios was very interesting. And they would say things like, it would say like, grandma to 8, like First Amendment, followed by Janine Pirro, retweeted by Donald Jr., like hashtag, or we go one, we go all. And it was just like this crazy sort of, not poetry exactly, but something strange about it that I found captivating for grotesque reasons. And so I was like, what could I do with all this stuff? Like, could this be like some sort of art exhibit or something, like of each one like framed or something? And so I was just screen capping them. And then after they kicked Trump off, they also kicked off all the QAnon accounts, seemingly, and tens of thousands of others. And so I realized that now I suddenly have a sort of archive of a vanished civilization. And I started going back and checking some of these accounts, and a lot of them are gone. It says account suspended. And then a lot of other ones have lost about 30 to 40% of their followers. So a huge portion of MAGA world, QAnon world, has been vaporized from Twitter. And I've noticed now, just in the past couple of weeks, that when you look at when Don Jr. tweets something, all the replies, virtually like 95 to 98% of the replies, are people dunking on him, saying you're stupid, saying you're going to end up in jail. Like all of those supporters on Twitter seem to have vanished. So maybe so some of these people were kicked off the platforms. Some of them maybe after it became clear that Trump was not going to be president for a second term, they went back to their normal lives. Or maybe some of them became disgusted after the riot at the Capitol. So there's a lot of possible
I wonder if it's that what weakened those accounts was that so many people were kicked off. So the ones who remained lost followers because those people were kicked off, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So so a lot of them seem to be gone. I need to really look at this closely. I only looked at about 10 of them, but a number of them, the account is gone, but then the follower accounts are way down. And one of the funny things about these, I don't know if you've ever seen these type of people, the MAGA people, they'd always have they always followed each other. And so they always had like 73,000.7 followers, and they followed 73.7 thousand people. This is very different than liberal or socialist world, where like the top accounts have 50,000 followers and they follow 128 people. So it's a weird, like the right side of the aisle is
I feel very much in a bubble because I very vaguely know what this is. And the only reason I know is because I wrote an anti-gun article once for the New Republic and got these people in my replies for like weeks. And I got to see a lot of the bios and all the things, and I got a sense. So like that type of bio, this wouldn't have been like QAnon, I guess.
That was pre-Trump and pre-QAnon.
But yeah, I'm familiar with like a sort of, like it would be like First Amendment, Second Amendment, Israel. It would always be like Israel, and it was like these were not Jewish people. Like this was just, except that one of the people who was once mad at me, not about that, or about something else, was Roseanne.
Oh, really? You got into it with Roseanne?
I got into it. Well, into it. I mean, not as. I got an angry tweet about some headline that I'd gotten for an article from Roseanne. It was the anti-Nigella Lawson moment.
Okay, so I'll just read. So I have all these saved in my phone, and so here's one. And there was something about the image they would use. There's almost always something grotesque about either their background image, their name, their avatar, or their bio. And so this is just a random one I picked. It's a photo of a woman. Dawn, I stand with President Trump! 3 stars. The 3 stars thing is supporters of General Flynn because he was a 3-star general.
This is very specific.
Yes. And Dawn _Demore 1, and then her bio is Donald Trump, but in italics, those like that alternate font that italicizes everything that people use on Twitter. Hashtag best president ever. Hashtag Flynn fighters. American flag emoji. Hashtag Ben Garrison cartoons, and then a URL, and then at GRRR graphics, which is this guy Ben Garrison, the account, and he was sort of like the most prominent MAGA editorial cartoonist. He got kicked off a couple of days after Trump did. Sadly, a lot of people are obsessed with him because his drawings are so strange, and he always had Trump as this like super fit guy, like this buff dude, and then ending with a rose emoji, which is usually understood to be the DSA symbol, but probably this woman doesn't know that and just likes flowers. And she followed 20,000.1 and had 53.9 thousand followers. And so I'll check afterwards if she still exists, but I bet that she got kicked off for being QAnon or something.
That seems like an exciting corner of Twitter that I'm glad not to know about.
Yeah, I wonder if you didn't see it, because I would often find these people from trending topics. And
I guess I don't look so much at that.
Yeah, and I know those differ based on country. So you probably get the Canadian trending topics.
And I don't think I look at them except at what they are sometimes, because it'll often be like Jews, and I'll be like, that again.
That's always bad news.
Anything
creepy. Jew or Jewish that like this is not good. Not good for the Jews. Okay, so that's just my weird obsession. If anyone has an idea for what I can do with all this, all these screen capture information,
I will think about this, because I want you to do something with it.
Okay, so we've gone a little bit over now, but maybe this will be the last section, last question, which is I've done a couple other episodes with people about social media over the past year or so, and I've asked them at the end, if you could snap your fingers in the way Thanos does in the Avengers movie, and social media, magically disappeared and couldn't come back, all the rest of the internet continues to exist, but the social media part is gone forever, would you do that to like save humanity from social media?
Okay, so I thought about this since you posed the question before we started, and I'm going to say that I would not get rid of it, precisely because we have been locked down for a year, and I think to be truly, truly locked down, unable to talk to anybody not in your home for a year would be a little bit maddening, and that it has been useful to be able to be on social media, like this year specifically, just to be a little bit out in the world virtually. So I think otherwise, yeah, I go through the same like pluses and minuses, like interesting people I've met on Twitter who I wouldn't have met otherwise, opportunities that have come through it. You know, I don't know that I've had ever opportunities or met people on Facebook, but things like that. But then I think like if you can't go out, I don't know, like you kind of have to have a little bit of something else.
Right.
So that's what kind of tips the scale for me, I think, would be like the lockdown. And also, yeah, like I live in Canada now, like, you know, to feel a little connected to the States. But on the whole for humanity, yeah, I think because we've all been locked down, I think I'm going to be, yay, let's all spend 24/7 on Twitter. And if you don't have a strong feeling about every single hire the New York Times has ever made, you're canceled.
Okay, what if, you know, we say Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the other ones, they're gone, but sort of the internet as existed in 2003, like, would you want to return to that? So that was like the beginning of the blog era. You were /are a blogger. And like that, the blogs had their own pluses and minuses, but like social media helped kill off the blogosphere that emerged.
Oh, I don't know. See, I'm weird in this, that I'm not nostalgic for the blog era. I think I sunk a lot of time. Like I look back at my old blog posts, those could have been articles, a lot of them, and I wasted time. I threw stuff away. I didn't have the confidence to, like, I first wrote something for The Atlantic in like 2013. I first blogged in like 2004. I don't think I required like 9 years of honing to like get there. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was just a confidence thing. And I think for a lot of people, probably this was the case too, that like, unless you were hired by some blog, it just was like a time suck. Yeah. So I'm not.
Okay. So that's interesting. See, I never really had my own blog. I just wrote a couple posts over the years and was too inconsistent and lazy to ever do it. But I have tweeted almost 100,000 times. And what was a bigger time suck for me personally? And then
fair enough.
Like the tweet that maybe I tweeted in 2014 that maybe, could be taken out of context if someone wanted to go after me for whatever reason, and then blah, blah, blah. I'm at the poorhouse or something.
What I will say about this is, because I had all that experience online prior to social media, I think obviously, knock on wood and all of this, like who knows what I'll say that, could be twisted in any mirror of any of us, whatever. But I think I did have that, if nothing else, the sense of what that means to be speaking online to audiences that might not have your best interest at heart. Like people got more mad at me like once through like stuff to do with my blog, and it was like a sort of willful misreading sort of situation, where people mistakenly believed that this is if I tell you, I mean, I'm going to say what this is because otherwise it's going to sound like it would have been something worse. People mistakenly believed that I have and insist upon people having only designer clothes. And this was ridiculous. I was in grad school at the time. And I'll tell you why this came up, because I had blogged something about, like, there was some sort of discussion about the Obama daughters at the inauguration. This was last week. I guess would have been
2009 or 13.
It wasn't 13.
So that was 2009.
Yeah. And I had said something like that. I thought like that it was stupid that they were being called out for having more, not the girls themselves, but whatever their family, for being in J. Crew, and that if anything, an occasion like that, they could have been in something fancier. And I was not saying, and they should have been, like, I wasn't. And then this became, what, you didn't think they looked nice? Like, I did think they looked nice. That was not what but anyway, became that like I personally had like all this designer, and it was like, I have the grad school stipend. I have garbage clothing. What are you talking about? But,
wait, so was the blow up the commenters, or like other blogs were picking this up?
So then it got picked up by another blog. And I think it was in the comments, but it was somebody from that blog who I knew in real life to be a good friend of an ex-boyfriend. Like, so there was an IRL level of things going on here, and people just got super mad. And then some other blog picked it up. And people just hated me over something very, very quaint in retrospect because there was no sense, like nobody was accusing me of anything like problematic. It was just that I was this like woman with the designer wardrobe who was snooty about clothes in some way. And I was like, and it just had nothing, but it just seemed so completely unhinged from anything in my actual life. But they gave me a sense of what's out there, and both like to just sort of not care if people are mad in a way, but also to anticipate the types of responses. Yeah. So I think I was trained in that early from blogging. And the other time I got somebody mad was that I tweeted Freudian slip there, right? I blogged. This was like
well, Twitter is a microblogging service.
Right. But this was like in 2005 or 6, given where I was living. Something about some coffee shop striking me as overpriced that I'd been to, and like the owner of that coffee shop commented on my blog like angrily, like they're not actually overpriced. Just like, okay. And I just couldn't believe that this person had found little old me, and I wasn't thinking about that they Googled their, so I just have a better sense, I think, of how this all works from that time.
Yeah. And part of the Bean Dad thing, and for people who don't know what Bean Dad is, you are a blessed person and continue on in your ignorance. But if you do know what Bean Dad is, part of the thing was that people dug up, like people started searching like Jew and Bean Dad to find his old tweets. And then I guess he once had like a comedic persona on Twitter where he was like making fun of different, races and ethnicities and so forth. And so that was part of the cancellation of Bean Dad was digging up the old tweets. And yeah,
and he only had designer clothing, I hear. It was very, very nice clothes.
Right. And he makes his daughter goes naked and he gives her a sewing machine and some fabric and says, figure it out yourself and you'll learn a valuable lesson. So, okay, maybe that's a good place to end it. We've probably, anyone who isn't on Twitter was like still listening to this somehow. They've hopefully been warned off. Actually, in the past couple of years, anytime someone asked me, like, should I get onto Twitter? Especially during the Trump years, people like felt like they needed to get on there to know what's happening. I'm always like, no, if you've resisted it this long, like, do not, like, stay away.
I know people who have accounts and like don't really do anything with them. It's not like to be on Twitter, you get sucked in. It's just, you never know what could happen to you.
Well, you get that first taste of virality where you get like three retweets and 8 likes. And then, that first hit, you're like chasing that magical high the rest of your life.
Exactly.
And you are, like stooped over, looking at your phone 24 hours a day. Okay. So yeah. So I think I've said this before, but I think I would, if I could snap my fingers and make it all disappear, I think I probably would, just based on the the fact that, like, if we could retroactively do it and then it wouldn't have let Trump become president, then that's good enough reason.
Okay, fair point.
But even today, I think it still has more negative parts to it than the positive parts. Although, like I said, there are some positive parts. And I guess that's what keeps us coming back for more. And, we've been talking for over an hour, so I'm sure there's like 50 new memes that have popped up and new things that people are arguing about.
Ignoring Twitter in this time.
Yeah, and people are probably like, where are Phoebe and Aryeh? Like, we need them to weigh in on like all the latest
I think so. I think
topics.
We better get back to that work.
Oh, yes, the work.
Thanks for having me on to discuss this. This is fun.
Well, thanks for doing it. I appreciate you taking the time. Blogging Heads alumnus Phoebe Maltz Bovy, now senior editor at The Signal. And the links to the Signal and the piece of yours that we discussed will be below on the Blogging Heads site. So, you can follow us on Twitter, and you are say your handle, because I think I'll get it wrong. Tweetertation, because you were originally tweeting your dissertation, right?
I joked that I would tweet my dissertation. I never actually, I don't think, subjected anybody to that.
Right, and so you're a class of Twitter person that I really respect, because when in 2008 or 9 or whatever, you came up with like a goofy name, and you've kept with it even as you've ascended to the heights.
I'm not like, I don't know. I probably
because there is some way to change that. I know that people have done.
I didn't even know. I did not know that was possible, but that's fine. I'm Tweetertation. That's fine. That's how it is. Yeah.
So that's sort of like game respect game sort of thing in the Twitter world that you stuck with that. So you're Tweetertation. I'm RDACW. You can follow us if you want to see what we think about all
our occasional appearances there.
Right. And what you can also do is you can smash that like button. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can rate and review in iTunes, which does help the show in various ways. And so Feminine Chaos continues. And if there's anyone who lost the thread of Feminine Chaos, you can search for it wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to it that way. And also subscribe to it on Patreon, which gets you like bonus episodes and newsletters and things like that.
That's right. Things like that. Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you, Phoebe. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners who somehow sat through all this nonsense. And we'll see you again next time.
Bye.